Don't mind me, just knitting here. You know, I just recently taught my sister to knit. She's blind, but such a natural. Many assume that because she is blind, she can't do the simplest things like knit. But heavens no! She earned an education and then got a job as a local elementary school teacher. Now, this never would have happened without Helen Keller. My, do I look up to that woman. She may have been blind and unfortunately deaf, but she sure didn't let that get in her way. After catching a glimpse of the world through sign language, Helen Keller became one of the most influential speakers, going beyond everyone's expectations and taking a stand against the unkind laws and attitudes toward people with disabilities. Helen Keller was born in the late 1800s, a time when people thought having disabilities was something to be ashamed of. People with mental or physical disabilities were shunned by others and housed with the homeless and the criminals. Some were even chained to the wall. Can you imagine? People with disabilities continue to be treated like outcasts. In some countries, people believe that those with disabilities were being punished for sinning in an earlier life. Many avoided them or were even scared of them. Helen Keller was born a healthy baby but lost her sight and hearing at a young age due to scarlet fever. By the time Helen was 6 years old, she was constantly having raging tantrums and trying to communicate but having trouble. Her parents contacted the Perkins School for the Blind. They sent the Kellers a young graduate named Anne Sullivan. She had contracted trachoma at the age of 5 and had gone blind, but had many operations and eventually had correct vision. Anne taught Helen an amazing amount of words in a short period of time. Helen later said at a convention in 1925, "You have heard how a little word dropped from the fingers of another. It is because my teacher learned about me and broke through that dark, silent imprisonment in which I was held that I am here and able to work for myself and others." Over time, Helen and Anne became close friends and eventually lifelong companions. Helen Keller took a stand by proving her intelligence despite her disability. She attended the Cambridge School for Young Ladies and with the help of Anne as a translator, passed all of her classes, earning honors in English and German. She was smarter than many of her pupils and had incredibly difficult obstacles. She later graduated at Radcliffe College. She was the first blind and deaf person to graduate from college. Helen Keller is known for her great intelligence, and it was her education that was the building blocks for her career, which changed how we view others today. News began to spread of the blind and deaf girl who was so highly educated. Helen became a celebrity with the press. She later became friends with figures such as Alexander Graham Bell, Mark Twain, and Charlie Chaplin. She also met every single United States president from Calvin Coolidge to John F. Kennedy. But this was not because of her academics, it was because of her strong opinions. Helen Keller used her spotlight to take a stand against current problems at the time. She spoke strongly for pacifism and women's rights, but is most known for her speeches related to disability discrimination. The most powerful thing about Helen Keller speaking out like this was that she had disabilities, and she could talk from experience that being treated differently for having disabilities was unacceptable. Helen's goal was to make sure people with disabilities were accepted in society and never treated with disrespect like back then. She spoke out against the unemployment, unfair schooling, and overall unkind treatment of those with disabilities. She later said at a convention, "Try to imagine how you would feel if you were stricken blind today. Picture yourself stumbling and groping at noonday as in the night. Now, in that dark, wouldn't you be glad if a friend took you by the hand and said, 'Come with me and I will show you how to do some of the things you used to do when you could see?'" Now, the friend she was referring to is the American Federation for the Blind. But as soon as I read the quote, I was thinking about how it would feel to be overcome with darkness, stumbling around. I admire how she uses empathy to make people think, for a lot of people don't put themselves in a blind or deaf person's shoes. Helen's speeches became known all around the world. She and Anne Sullivan took a trip to about 30 different countries, taking a stand against disability discrimination. She never directly spoke out against the law, but without a doubt had an influence on many laws relating to people with disabilities, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act, which changed the life and employment of those with disabilities. Her intelligence proved that people with disabilities were capable of much more. In 1915, she, with the help of George Kessler, a landscape planner, founded the Helen Keller International Organization, which is still an organization dedicated to helping those who are blind. Sorry, is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She also helped found the American Civil Liberties Union, which defends the rights and liberties of the people and is still very popular. She was also a member of the National Federation for the Blind, an organization that broadens opportunities for the blind for more than 45 years. Helen was a woman of many causes. In 1961, Helen Keller suffered from a series of strokes. She died on June 27, 1968. On June 1st, 1968. June 27th, her birthday, is now forever known as Helen Keller Day, honoring her legacy. Helen Keller proved that she could do what others could do and more. Back then, many had the idea that people with disabilities couldn't make a difference. She not only got an education, but changed the world. It is because of her great intelligence and perseverance to be accepted in society that Helen Keller is still a name often heard today. She was determined to change people's attitudes toward people with disabilities, and she did. Overall, Helen Keller changed the perception of those with disabilities. Now, our world respects people with disabilities and accepts them. To her, being blind or deaf was only an obstacle in her life. She was a respected and well-known activist who took a stand against disability discrimination and never let anyone get in her way. Such an inspiration, isn't she? Like I said before, I really do look up to that woman.